we want to talk about actually telling your story. So the first thing we want to talk about is what voice are you speaking with? Now, this is more prevalent in fiction writing. However, it's still something that you need to consider. And I just want to go over the various voices that you can use when you're speaking. One is the first person, and that's where you refer to, it's I that is the narrator. I is the one telling the story. I entered the room. I read the book. I did this. The second person is kind of rarely used, although I did get a manuscript just last week, and it was in the second person voice, which was interesting because I was preparing this for the material. But it's where you are telling something directly to you. So the writer would say, and the next thing you need to do is, or when you try to do this, it's always kind of directed at you rather than just an I telling a story. Is that clear?
When you say directly towards you, are you referring to the audience who's reading that?
Yes.
Oh.
Yep, the readers.
Okay.
And then the third person voice, I think, is probably the one we're most familiar with, especially when we read other stories. It's where there is a narrator. We don't know who the mysterious narrator is, but that's the one that's referring to the characters as he or she or they or it. So once you determine what voice you're going to use to tell your story, it becomes easier now to go back to your outline and figure it out. Another thing that's important about what voice are you speaking with is your style. Is it intimate, creative, provocative? Do you embellish? Is it simple? Is it preachy, or is it engaging? These are things you have control of as the author. You determine what style you're going to communicate with. So think about that. You know, some people have unique styles. One of them is Quentin Tarantino. Now, I'm not a big fan of his movies because, one, they're pretty awful. I mean, they're really not great movies. And then they're always so laced with profanity and violence that, you know, but he sure can tell a story. Has anybody ever seen Pulp Fiction? Don't you love the way he told that story? The initial scene is the actual beginning of the last scene in the movie. So that's his style. And now we come to, you know, you hear people saying, is it Tarantino-esque? And you know, when they stick that esque on the back there, you know, it has become a model. So, you know, develop your own style. And, you know, don't be afraid to flourish and embellish. Don't be frivolous. Okay, that means you need a dictionary. You need your thesaurus because your words are going to speak. Okay? Catchphrases sometimes help as well. They will avoid redundancies. Little catchphrases that you repeat throughout. You don't want to say the same thing every time. You refer to your main point. Because the reader will say, well, why am I going to read chapter 5 if you said the same thing, chapter 2, 3, 4? But if you use a little catchphrase, then the reader can identify that you're going back to that thought. So, again, not to be frivolous, but it is something that you can use that will help you communicate more clearly as you begin telling your story. You have to consider your audience as always. You have to be relevant. Make sure your audience can and will relate to the topic that you're discussing and the voice that you're using to discuss it in. You want to watch your slang, your jargon, your double entendres. I kind of like those. Those are fun, but you have to be clever, and you have to understand that they're risky to use. With slang, you really want to avoid, yes?
Sorry, what is a double entendre?
I'm get it.
Okay, thanks.
Uh-huh. With slang, you want to be careful because unless you're talking to a very narrow audience, which is possible, you have to assume that everybody's going to understand that slang, and that's not necessarily true. So you can use it for effect, but be careful with using slang. And the same is true for jargon. If you're writing a Christian book, for example, there's a lot of jargon in us. We talk about the body and other things. If I'm not a Christian, where we talk about the body, I don't know what you mean by that. So when you're using jargon, you may have to define it, and you may have to explain it for your audience. Um, use it sparingly. If you're writing a book, a Christian book, and it's only for established Christians, then you're okay. Yeah, you get it? Yeah. The double entendre. It's really just an ambiguous statement, really. It's something that you say that can have two meanings. And normally when people use them, it's because they want to create a kind of a risque kind of attitude. So, for example, if I could say, Bobby, can you do me this afternoon? Well, some people would go, what is she talking about? What did she say? I know your thoughts out there. No, but seriously, if you've been to a hairdresser, you know that's how they talk. I'm going to do you next. You want me to do you today? Let me do you over here, you know. So, but it's risky if I'm talking to people and they don't know the hairdresser's story. They haven't been to a hairdresser. Now I've created an image that I really don't want them to have about what I said. So if you can use it cleverly, it can be a great tool also to create interest in the reader, to make the reader go, wait a minute, what did she say? What did he say? Writing like you speak. We have to be careful about writing the way we speak. If you are an articulate person, you still have to be careful about writing the way you speak, because when you speak, there is an exchange of energy that influences how your message is received. I'm talking, there are some people go, yeah, right, okay. So now we just exchanged something there. Well, if I'm sitting in my favorite chair at home, and I don't know you from Adam, and let's make that a catchphrase, I don't know you from Adam. You have to write as if the person you're writing for doesn't know you from Adam. Okay? So if I'm sitting in my chair and I don't know you from Adam, I don't feel that exchange. So you have to be a little more clear. There's no energy to provide understanding. Okay? We talked about the energy. It can be right or wrong. It depends on how well you communicate. So for the most part, you want to write even more clearer than you speak, because the energy created when you're at the mic is different than when you're at the keyboard. Be intimate. Be personal with your writing. In our initial session, I asked you who was your favorite author or what was your favorite book, and I didn't tell you mine. My favorite author is Louisa May Alcott, because she wrote my favorite book, which was Little Women. When I was a little girl, I read this book, and I could imagine everything she wrote. Now, my book didn't have pictures. Later, because my kids buy me copies every time they see it, you know. But later, I see there's lots of pictures in that book. But there were no pictures when I read it. But I could feel the fireplace crackling, even though I never had a fireplace. I didn't know what that meant. But I could feel it from the way she described it. So that's the reason that's one of my favorite books. And that's what you want to do to your readers. You want to describe whatever it is you're saying so that they can, you know, key into your experience or whatever information you're sharing. Okay, you want to make it intimate, to engage them, to draw them in to listening to what you have to say. See, and that's another thing. Things like come up. You know, you can't write that stuff down. That's why you have to write like you write. Write as if you're writing a letter to a friend. That's someone asked me once, they read one of my blogs, and they said, man, that just felt like you were writing just to me. Well, the way Louisa May Alcott wrote kind of helped me develop a style that I can speak to you intimately, as if I'm talking to you. And guess what? When you're writing a book for someone who doesn't know you from Adam, that's what you want them to feel, as if you have connected, as if there's been a connection. So, you know, find your own way to be intimate. Using your words will be very, very important. And then just get busy, paragraph by paragraph. Start building your story. We talked last week about in your chapter titles need to have at least 3 points in them. And some of your chapters I read, there's